Oh, je vais peut-être changer de lumière. Salut chat, j'espère que vous allez bien. C'est mieux comme ça. Ah. Ok, nice. Nice. Bon. Stylé. Alors, jeux vidéo. Je pense pas qu'on va regarder que du Pokémon, même si je pense... Genre celle-là, tu vois, elle est intéressante. Celle-là, tu vois, elle a l'air bien.
Did you know that there was a time when Mandibuzz was on almost every competitive OU team? Yes, Mandibuzz, this Pokemon. When you think of a meta Pokemon, a high usage Pokemon in OU, this is probably not what you think of. This is a regular vulture from real life. Its stats aren't even very good. What in the world was Mandibuzz doing alongside the heavy hitters like Landorus Therian with its incredible stats and every move?
Je suis en train de manger parce que j'ai...
Or pseudo-legendary.
Je viens de rentrer, du coup j'ai pas mangé encore.
Surely Mandibuzz is not in the same conversation. Those Pokemon are meta because they have high stats and great typing and great abilities and all of that. But sometimes a Pokemon can be meta for different reasons, for more seemingly random and specific reasons. An unassuming Pokemon like Mandibuzz can have just enough desirable traits to become popular and competitive, despite seeming so much worse than everything else in the format. And funnily enough, in the case of Mandibuzz, this actually happened twice. But first, we must urgently discuss the goings-on of infamous Cup-themed Pokemon Cuptonio. Through the sheer power of his signature move, Half Empty, he has now occupied most of the known world. The Empire of Fear that Iron Mugulus once clung to is slipping away before his eyes, like a shattered mug weakly held together by glue. Only by using YouTube's new hype feature under this video can we hope to resolve this conflict through peaceful negotiation rather than further violence. Liking the video and subscribing to the channel will also help, according to smart people. Thank you. Back in Generation 6, a Pokemon called Aegislash was released, and for a time Aegislash was the most powerful thing in the entire OU format. This Pokemon was insane, with its incredible steel ghost typing, monstrous stats, and its unbelievable ability stance change, which allowed it to switch between a massive defensive stat or offensive stat at will. Every time you attack, you gain offensive stats, and when you use the King's Shield move, you revert back to the defensive state. We have never seen a Pokemon like this since that is able to transform between an offensive and a defensive Pokemon at will. It's an incredibly powerful concept. But the one thing that stood against Aegislash's reign of terror was Mandibuzz. Mandibuzz happens to be a Pokemon that matches up excellently against Aegislash, because Mandibuzz is a dark flying type. So it resists ghosts, and it has access to Dark Stab, dealing extra damage with dark moves. Mandibuzz also has the move Foul Play, and this is a great attack that allows you to deal damage to the enemy based on how high their attack stat is. It's fantastic on defensive Pokemon as counterplay to offensive Pokemon. If you're up against a really strong physical attacker, or if the enemy has boosted up their attack with Swords Dance or Dragon Dance, Foul Play will often just one-hit KO them, punishing them for having high attack. And this move is perfect against Aegislash. If they try to attack you, they will transform into their offensive stance, and because they have such a high attack now, Foul Play will deal super effective, massive damage and destroy them in one hit. Mandibuzz was the only thing that could defensively and offensively handle Aegislash, and it was on almost every team as a result.
Juste à cause d'un Pokémon,
Eventually, though, in
t'es
Gen
obligé
6,
d'avoir un autre.
Aegislash was banned
Ça, c'est chaud.
from competitive, deemed too powerful for the metagame, which was fair. And so Mandibuzz flew off into the sunset to return at a later time, to save the metagame when he was needed. And that time did come. In Generation 8, Mandibuzz returned to the forefront for many different reasons, actually. In Gen 8, Aegislash returned to the OU format because it received a stat nerf and it was a bit more manageable now. So with Aegislash back in the format, in its new nerfed state, Mandibuzz had a reason to exist again as perhaps the most effective answer to Aegislash in the game. That was one reason to use Aegislash again. Another was the addition of heavy-duty boots to the game, enhancing Mandibuzz defensively, since it could ignore Stealth Rock and switch in much more safely. Gen 8 also saw the significant rise of Ghost type as an offensive powerhouse, because in Gen 8, the move Pursuit was removed from the game entirely. And Pursuit was a move that used to be able to trap and eliminate Ghost types. It kept them in check a little bit. Now that Pursuit was gone, Ghost types could roam freer than they ever have before, and the need for some sort of Ghost resistance was more and more important, as the new Dragapult was in the game, and Gengar was feeling pretty strong too in early metagames. So Mandibuzz had a reason to exist in that sense too. Aegislash was one of the popular ghost threats at the time,
Donc,
as was
premier c'était pour counter.
Gengar. But the usefulness of Mandibuzz did not end
Aegislash, comment ça s'appelle en français?
Later on in DLC.
Comment il s'appelle en français? Aegislash, comme ça. Exagide, c'est ça. Le premier c'était pour counter Exagide, qu'il a été pris lui. Et après c'était parce qu'il y avait beaucoup de types spectres. Okay.
A new dark fighting type legendary Pokemon with the absurd new move Wicked Blow. Wicked Blow is a move that
lui, il est toujours
always
broken.
critical hits and has a high AT power. This move was incredibly overwhelming offensively. As Dark is a great offensive type. This has such a high power and ignores defensive boosts. It also ignores intimidation because crits ignore attack debuffs. Urshifu was incredibly overwhelming, but guess who the hell resists Wicked Blow and can strike back with a bit of flying type super effective damage? It's our hero Mandibuzz yet again. Now of course Mandibuzz could not switch in against close combat the other attack Urshifu had, but at least it could prevent Choice Band Urshifu from spamming Wicked Blow risk-free. And there was another really broken guy that Mandibuzz also responded well to, and that was Spectria. All new horse Pokemon.
C'est trop fort.
And a Pokemon known for being incredibly powerful on the stats side.
C'est pas Spectria, c'est Calyrex Spectre, non?
Spectria pretty much only gets ghost moves.
Ah non.
I think it gets Dark Pulse too, and that's it. But its stats are insane, and it has the ability Grim Neigh, which acts like Moxie for special attack.
Ah, c'est juste Spectria.
Even though this Pokemon is so limited in its actual offensive options, those options are so overwhelming that you desperately needed some response to them, and guess who the hell was a great one? Mandibuzz yet again, folks.
En fait, c'est dès qu'il y a un type spectre ou ténèbres, Mandibuzz, genre, il est fort.
On top of these traits that Mandibuzz has, it was also useful for its access to defog, to remove hazards, knock off as well, to remove items, which is increasingly important. And U-turn to pivot out. These are all great moves. So it's doing this really important defensive job thanks to its typing, and it also just provides your team with really valuable and imperative utility all at once.
くだらぬことで我の安眠を邪魔するな。この怒り、貴様に。
Not only in that Gen 6 metagame where Aegislash was running rampant, but also in this Gen 8 metagame where Urshifu and Spectria were running rampant. Mandibuzz was everywhere, holding the world on its shoulders, and making this metagame playable single-handedly. Now eventually all of this stuff
was
banned in Gen 8. Urshifu was banned, as was Spectria. But surprisingly, the usefulness of Mandibuzz still persisted, because Mandibuzz still matched up well against all those ghost types.
En fait, il a des bons types. Il a des bons types et il a des bonnes attaques. Donc, pourquoi s'en priver?
And you also match up very well against grassy terrain. Rillaboom, that foul play is useful against popular threats like Excadrill and any boost sweeper, really. And with boots, you are just so much more consistent at switching in. You got that defog and pivoting, which is always great. So Mandibuzz is still pretty
Il a
good.
des bonnes stats, il a des bonnes attaques.
It's not quite OU ranked anymore, with its job not
Ça
being
rien
as
de...
imperative as it was
Ça marche,
in
ça
the more
marche.
tumultuous metagames, but still a respectable position for Mandibuzz, after all was said and done. And I think you can still build with Mandibuzz and do alright with it. The fact that Mandibuzz, of all things, is a Pokemon that props up whenever metagames are full of broken threats is quite funny to me. It is a Pokemon that I quite like, but it's because of this reason that I like it, that it was randomly meta in these situations. If not for it having these particular traits to rise to the occasion and respond to these broken threats, I don't know if I ever would have thought twice about Mandibuzz. It is just a vulture. It's not a very remarkable Pokemon, but it was elevated to a higher status because of meta conditions, and isn't that beautiful? Isn't that wonderful? I think that's a great story. Pokemon becoming meta, not because of their inherent strength, but because of the environment around them, is one of my favorite phenomenon in competitive Pokemon. And another great example of this is the case of Charizard in Gen 3. This is the only metagame where simple base form Charizard
ah oui, mais il parle du 1v1 du coup.
And it wasn't always the
Draco
case
Feu,
that Charizard was ranked OU.
en VGC,
This is a relatively recent update to the tiering, and Gen 3 is an old Gen tier that does occasionally update the OU list. Even more recently, Medicham rose to OU, but Charizard rising to OU was a big deal. Because for years, people thought this Pokemon sucked, and when you look at it, just off its fundamental traits, you would think that it does suck. It's very weak on the defensive side, its stats are just all around average. 109 special attack is alright, but compared to some of the heavy hitters of OU like Zapdos, Gengar, Tyranitar, Charizard is looking pretty weak comparatively. Charizard also has significant competition from a similar Pokemon. Moltres has the exact same fire-flying type combo and higher stats across the board. Way higher special attack, better bulk, access to Will-O-Wisp, which is very significant. Charizard is seemingly outclassed and just not worth using in this environment. So why did it rise to OU, and why did people realize, wait a second, this guy's actually pretty functional and good in this metagame? Well, first I think we have to acknowledge the fact that Gen 3 is an environment before Stealth Rock existed in the series. Stealth Rock is a move that completely killed Charizard's chances at OU viability ever since it was released. Because Stealth Rock is an entry hazard that deals damage as you switch in based on your weakness to Rock. And Charizard is of course times 4 weak to Rock. This move was everywhere and therefore Charizard was nowhere. But in Gen 3 there's no Stealth Rock to be seen, and in fact the only entry hazard that exists in this game is Spikes, and Charizard is immune to Spikes. Fire Flying is, for most of the Pokemon series, a terrible typing, but in Gen 3 it's a great typing. You have Burn immunity, which is very useful, Spikes immunity, and Ground immunity. Fire types are usually weak to ground and vulnerable to the Pokemon Dugtrio, who can trap you and eliminate you with super effective Earthquake. But Charizard is a fire type that is not worried about such a thing. So that gives Charizard quite a big advantage over other fire types in the game in Gen 3, who are worried about Spikes and Earthquake and Dugtrio, while Charizard isn't. But there's still the issue of competition with Moltres. How does Charizard justify existence when Moltres is right there?
Tout ce qu'il a dit,
well, Charizard has
il
two
est bon parce qu'il est feu et vol.
Moltres does not have access to. One of them is the move Focus Punch. Focus Punch is a fighting type physical move with 100 accuracy and a massive 150 base power. But there's a catch. When you use this move, you tighten your focus first. And if you are hit with any attack whatsoever, your focus will break and the move will fail. So Focus Punch can only be used if you are predicting that the opponent will not attack or that they will switch out. Otherwise, Focus Punch will do nothing. So Focus Punch is a high risk, high reward move that is hinging on a correct prediction from the user. Or the insurance of a substitute being up. Because if a substitute is up, it will shield you from the incoming damage and allow Focus Punch to go through unchecked. Charizard having access to this option is significant, because it gives Charizard a way to threaten Blissey. Blissey is the most popular special wall in Gen 3 and one of the most popular Pokemon in high-level competitive play. And Blissey is really excellent against other special attackers like Moltres and Zapdos that are competing with Charizard. Blissey, for the most part, completely stonewalls them and forces them out. Blissey shrugs off all special damage easily, heals up cripples enemies with status,
Donc grâce à Focus Punch.
1v1s them with seismic toss.
Okay.
It's just very... Another great example of this phenomenon is the case of Nido Queen in Generation 4 OU.
Mais Nido Queen,
Now, you might
il
be
est bon.
thinking, now of all the metagames in history, I think that where you will find the most examples of what I'm talking about here, Pokemon that are good purely because of the meta conditions surrounding them, is Gen 5 OU. Gen 5 OU is one of the most unique metagames in Pokemon history because this is a metagame where permanent weather effects existed. The weather wars were happening here, and especially permanent rain existing in an OU format had a significant impact on what was viable and what was not. My personal favorite when it comes to Pokemon only good because of Gen 5's unique meta conditions is Jellicent. Jellicent,
okay.
when you look at it, is pretty average, and in every other generation, it is quite average. It has low
En fait,
stats.
là, il dit que des
It does have a
Pokémon,
good water ghost typing.
genre qui sont ok. Genre, les trucs qui sont ok. Pokémon. This new do not use. Ok.
Imagine bringing your side project to life just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44,
What?
a complete AI creation platform. Describe what you want and watch it take shape. You can plan, customize, and expand in any direction. From tools built for one to platforms ready for many. From passion projects to enterprise-grade systems. Everything is built in and ready to launch. It's a new world of creation, where you can go as far as your imagination takes you.
Wesh.
Can you imagine it? Let's make your dream a reality, right now.
Ok, base. Base 44.
Sometimes our favorite Pokemon are pretty bad competitively, but it's not my fault I like Pokemon like Dreepy. What if I want to use it? Do I have the metagame for you? Because Pokemon Showdown just added the metagame Do Not Use. It's a random battle style tier where all Pokemon have under 280 BSD. So today, just like my family's advice during high school, we're gonna ignore the do not play sign and we're gonna play. All right, so I kind of had to try this metagame because, like, look, my opponent has a Wimpod. Wait, they're gonna get so much value out of this Pokemon. It's gonna get spikes and stuff. Why am I choice spec? Yeah, definitely don't use this. Taunting is crazy. I guess I could be Frostlass and Spike. I didn't even hit them down to their Wimp out. I love, by the way, ooh, this is nasty. Ooh, this is hold up, my team actually, and Arrokuda just actually broke him.
Je connais pas assez. Comment ça s'appelle? Je connais pas assez les 1v1. Oh, Jinxie.
Video looks really intriguing, bro. What if Clash Royale never changed elixir costs? Now, as you guys know, I started playing Clash Royale in 2016, about 1 month after the game came out, so I feel like
moi j'avais pas commencé si tôt.
I quit in the 2020 to 2020.
Je crois que j'ai commencé en 2018-2019. Après j'ai arrêté. J'avais joué genre 3-4 mois. Et après j'ai repris cette année.
Yes.
But what if none of those costs ever changed? What if Cannon still cost 6 elixir?
Yeah, I still can't even believe that.
What if Rage still covered half the map for 3? What if the heal spell never got deleted? This is the...
I forgot about the heal spell. Oh my god. Bro, that was before the healer was even a card.
Clash Royale
I forgot about
never
that.
happened. A timeline where Supercell never fixed the broken, never spared the weak, and never balanced the cost of chaos. Welcome to Elixir Madness. Number 1, Cannon.
Le canon à 6 par contre c'est chaud. Maintenant il a 3.
Cost 6 elixir. And if it still did, would be one of the worst cards in Clash Royale.
Yes.
Sure, in the beta, it was massive, double the HP, 60-second lifetime, and 7 tiles of range. It didn't just stop Hog Riders, it erased them. Entire pushes vanished in front of this thing. Back then, with no miner, no earthquake, and barely any ways to bypass it, the cannon was a fortress. You dropped it once and just waited. But in today's Clash Royale, the same cannon would be a complete liability. The game is faster, win conditions are sneakier, and a 6 elixir investment in a ground-only building with no spam effects or utility, that is just suicide. It might stick around forever, sure, but for 6 elixir, you'd expect more than just survives a while. There's no chip value, no pressure, no air defense, even if it got the same massive range and
S'il pouvait taper le...
That's the biggest problem, bro. It's 6 elixir and it doesn't even attack the air, though.
Ouais, c'est ça. S'il attaquait les trucs volants, franchement, ça serait bien. Et ça pourrait être... Mais...
Well, forget it. The whole point of Evo Cannon is that it cycles fast and sets up early. At 6 elixir, it would be nearly impossible to reach the evolution cycle without destroying your tempo. No synergy, no rotation, no value. In a world where Cannon never got its cost nerfed, Hog 2.6 would have never existed. Control decks would have no cheap option, and defensive cycle decks as we knew them, they'd be gone. The 6 elixir cannon might have looked cool, but in the long run, it would have buried itself under the weight of its own cost. A relic of slow beta gameplay, completely out of place in the game we know today. Number 2, Rage. Today, Rage is a different spell. You don't see it much in top competitive decks, but when it is played right, it absolutely
Rage is all over competitive decks.
Irks. But back in the early days of Clash Royale, Rage wasn't just...
See, if I remember correctly, Rage used to not do damage to anything. Now it does.
Good. It was terrifying. 40% attack speed, a longer duration, and one broken mechanic that completely rewrote the rules. Permanent Rage. If a troop touched the spell, even for a split second, it stayed enraged forever. It was like...
What?
I remember that. Jesus Murphy.
Mais c'est broken.
Where the entire arena is constantly enraged, except this was ladder, real battles and real trophies. And the rage was one-sided. Now picture that in today's meta. A goblin giant Sparky push perma-raged the moment they spawn in. You're defending a tank and a death laser that move and fire faster indefinitely. Lumberloon, say goodbye to your tower in seconds. Elite Barbarian, rage them once and you're basically doomed. Sure, Rage didn't deal any damage, so against Swarm decks it could feel a little underwhelming, but that did not matter, because one good Rage and
that's how the old freeze used to look.
Everything else became the problem. In an alternate timeline where Rage was never changed, it wouldn't just be a support spell. It would be a meta-defining nightmare. A low-cost, high-reward boost
ça pourrait pas marcher, ça pourrait pas marcher. Genre ça, c'est trop fort. En fait, juste le fait que tu le gardes tout le temps, genre une fois que le troupe la touche, tu l'as, il l'a, c'est compliqué.
Today, Fire Spirit is a solid 1 elixir card. Fast cycle, big chip damage, and strong synergy in Drill and Royal Hog decks. But once upon a time, it was 3 of them. 3 Fire Spirits for just 2 elixir. And if that version existed today, it would be one of the most unpredictable and dangerous cycle nukes in the game. They could wipe out minions, skeleton army, goblin barrel, and even 3 musketeers with a well-timed zap. No spell could match that kind of splash value, and in today's meta, they would be an absolute nightmare for log bait. Goblin barrel, gone for 2 elixir. No precise timing, no fancy placements, and if you paired them with Tornado, well, good luck. You'd clump everything together, and the spirits would vaporize the entire push in an instant. That synergy alone would force opponents to completely rethink their spacing and timing. Yes, they had their weaknesses. They died to...
It was basically like a 2 elixir fireball, bro.
everything. Logs, snowballs, arrows, even an ice spirit could shut them down. And if their jump missed, well, you just threw away 2 elixir. But when they did connect, the payoff was massive. They could force spells, punish
C'est vrai que genre s'il y avait ça, les decks avec beaucoup de petites troupes, ils se feront éclater.
And that's why Supercell decided to change them. They were just too volatile to keep in a game built around control and consistency. But still, part of me wishes they'd come back. Not in their old form, but maybe as an evolution. Number 4, Furnace.
La fournaise.
I kind of... Wait, the Furnace was more than 4 elixir at one point? I don't remember that. I remember the Furnace being good, though.
Imagine paying
Furnace,
5 elixir for this. That is how Furnace started, and even back then...
Wait. What?
C'est pas possible.
It was not worth it. Yes, it pressured. Yes, it forced responses, but for 5 elixir, Furnace felt like a bad deal. So what if that never changed? What if Furnace still cost 5 elixir today? Truth is, Furnace has always kind of had a weird identity crisis. It's tied directly to fire spirits, meaning
j'ai eu peur, j'ai cru que c'était vraiment faux, mais non.
Followed. If spirits were too weak, Furnace was useless. If they were too strong, Furnace became toxic. That link made it nearly impossible to balance properly, and when Supercell finally reworked Fire Spirit into a solo 1 elixir troop, Furnace got dragged along for the ride. It went from spawning 2 spirits per wave to 1. Its lifetime dropped, its HP was nerfed again and again and again. And somehow, even after all that, players still
J'ai cru qu'ils allaient faire un truc.
hate it, because no matter how weak Furnace is, it is still annoying. It still chips, it still demands answers. It still punishes lazy defense. But if it cost 5 elixir, not a chance. A 5 elixir Furnace in today's...
Did y'all ever play Clash in like the hut meta when there was like people would just run Goblin Hut, Furnace, like Tombstone? It was age.
Je crois, ouais.
They would just stack
Je crois que j'avais joué un peu.
and not do anything.
Clash Royale would be a throw pick, a dead card. But what if I told you there was one spawner that refused to die? We'll get there. Number 5, Musketeer.
Wait, what?
Musketeer is a cornerstone of Hog 2.6, but that only happened after she was fixed. Because when launched, Musketeer cost 5 elixir. Yes, she hit harder,
Non mais bro, 5 c'est nul.
harder than today, but that damage boost didn't mean much when she was constantly outpaced by cheaper decks. In a game all about timing and pressure, she was just too slow. You couldn't cycle back to her fast enough, you couldn't afford to stack her, you couldn't reliably build around her. And even if you did, one misstep, one misplacement, and poof, there went your 5 elixir investment. That is why in 2016, Musketeer spent most of her time at the bottom of the usage charts. Even with decks like Early Hog Cycle and Royal Giant experimenting with her, she never felt like a win condition enabler, more like a win condition tax. It wasn't until she dropped to 4 elixir and Ice Golem joined the scene that she finally found her home. That is when the
4 elixir, c'est parfait, genre.
was born.
C'est parfait.
Consistent, lethal in the right hands. But imagine if she never got that change. What if Musketeer still cost 5 today? Would anyone still use her? Sure, maybe a player like Muhammad Light would squeeze value out of her in some off-meta control deck. Maybe there'd be a weird giant graveyard variant in one season, but for 99% of players, dead card. Sometimes even 1 elixir can decide a card's entire
What language is that?
Higher future. And for Musketeer, that 1 elixir made the difference between a forgotten support troop and the backbone of Clash Royale's most iconic decks. But she's not the only card whose entire future hinged on a single elixir. Some got lucky, others weren't so fortunate. Number 6, Skeleton Army.
C'était 4.
Back in 2016,
4.
Army didn't cost 3 elixir.
4, ça fait cher.
4, and it spawned not 15, but 21 skeletons.
Oh non, par contre, c'est pas mal.
Worked. Even in the height of Zap meta, Skarmy found value. Why? Because 21 skeletons were chaotic. They didn't line up neatly like minions or goblins.
I'm not gonna lie, Skeleton Army was actually kind of broken back then.
4 pour 20 squelettes, c'est énorme. C'est énorme.
There just wasn't that many cards like Hog, So Skarmy was so good against
mattered. You could zap 18 of them and still get shredded by the remaining 3. But that era didn't last, because over time, Clash Royale added more answers than Skarmy could handle. The Log, Snowball, Earthquake, Royal Delivery, Fire Spirit, Magic Archer, Mother Witch, and the list goes on. Every
c'est vrai que la Mother
year it
Witch
got
là, avec les
easier
20
and
squelettes.
easier to delete them. And even after the cost was dropped to 3 elixir and the skeleton count reduced to 15, Skarmy still felt off. They were chaos, they were unpredictable, and they were everywhere. But at 4 elixir in today's meta, Skarmy wouldn't be a defense, it would be a donation.
Yeah.
Number 7, Royal Recruits.
C'est vrai que maintenant, avec la curse, tout ça,
To this day,
Goblin Curse.
to this day, the most broken card in the history of the game.
Originally introduced at 6 elixir, and they were horrifying. Instant lane control, unbreakable defense, and constant pressure, all for the same cost as a giant skeleton. They didn't just defend, they shut down pushes. They didn't just split lane, they split souls. It didn't matter what you had in your deck, if you were caught off cycle, it was game over. Firecracker, Mega Knight, Elixir Golem, none of them came close to how frustrating recruits were when they cost 6. And the worst part? They could be spammed over and over and over again. Supercell eventually
Avec
bumped
6,
their
tu peux
elixir
spam?
cost to
Ouais, ça va.
8. And
Yeah,
over
so literally, they got the hardest nerf in the history of the game. Bro, I'm pretty sure, like, their usage rate went down, like, fucking, I don't even know, an insane percentage after that. Because then they went from being the best card in the game to unplayable. Because they jumped in from 6 elixir to 8.
for correction, that
C'est vrai que
killed
8,
the
8 ça
card.
fait mal quand
Today,
même.
they cost 7, and
8,
they're
c'est quoi, c'est
still
Golem?
one of the most polarizing cards in the game. So if they never left 6, the game would not be playable. You would see 6 recruits on every bridge, every push,
Bro, and
every...
it's also, like, one thing, broken cards are good, and it's fun, and it's exciting. But the problem is, bro, a broken card like the recruits, it just promotes not even thinking and just putting them down. Like, there's no thought that goes into recruits, bro. It's just
Okay.
deck. Clash Royale would be a recruits simulator. And let's be real, you would uninstall. Number 8, Goblin Barrel.
Goblin Barrel.
Goblin Barrel used to
Oh,
cost
4 c'est nul.
elixir. Yeah, 4. That's one more than now, and it really felt like it. Sure, it had this neat little
4
splash
c'est nul.
damage when it landed, but
it was
honestly,
terrible,
that
bro.
didn't do much. The real danger was always the 3 goblins inside. And for 4 elixir, they just didn't come out fast enough or hit hard enough to be worth it. The spell part felt like a gimmick. Cool in theory, but in practice, not worth it. You couldn't cycle fast, you couldn't maintain pressure, and suddenly this iconic win condition became a clunky liability. If Goblin Barrel never got that cost reduction to 3 elixir, Logbait as we know it wouldn't even exist. The archetype
C'est vrai,
would
c'est vrai.
die before it was ever born. That
C'est vrai que le
constant
Logbait,
pressure,
là,
that
il
ship
serait pas aussi
cycle, that
rapide
threat
et
of a
ça serait
sneaky
chaud.
barrel at any moment, that would be gone.
So we got our Skeleton Army over here, guys. Skeleton Army is a great counter for the Goblin Barrel, just like arrows. Seriously? That was absurd.
Bro, I actually remember that, bro. People would, dude, that's how, like, archaic the game was. Bro, I remember people would literally just go Goblin Barrel freeze, bro. The fact that that was actually a push at one point is so funny.
With the evolution, it wouldn't matter. A 4 elixir barrel in today's game would be
Boom.
dead on arrival.
Yeah.
Slow,
4,
expensive,
genre vraiment
and
tu
easy
pourrais...
to counter.
Genre,
It wouldn't be
c'est
big.
c'est joué dans
It
des
would be a
decks là, un
gift
peu
to
cycle,
your opponent.
où tu peux jouer vite et tout ça.
Number
4.
9, Mortar.
Whoa.
Mortier, c'est
what was
combien?
I wearing?
C'était 5? Non, pas mon mortier.
Bro, I didn't even
Pas mon mortier, les gars.
remember the night, chat.
Qu'est-ce qu'ils ont fait à mon mortier?
Look at the fucking night.
Mortar.
Hold up.
Would be dead on arrival. Slow, expensive, and easy to counter. It wouldn't be bait. It would be a gift to your opponent.
Dude, look at the night. It looks way different.
Number 9, Mortar. There was a time when
6! Non mais, qu'est-ce qu'ils ont fait à mon mortier?
Mortar cost 6 elixir. Yeah, 6.
Ah oui, mais il tape de loin, là.
Like a medieval trash can strapped to a stick. But then it was terrifying. The original mortar had a 13 tile range, double the damage it deals today.
Double!
The field for a full minute. That meant if you weren't
Mais je le veux,
counter,
je le
it
veux
would
à
just
6.
sit there, slowly but surely tearing your tower to pieces.
400.
If you let it lock on, well, good luck. You were probably already done. But here's the thing. Today, that version of Mortar simply wouldn't work. Modern Clash Royale is faster, more complex, and more punishing.
Bien sûr,
A
ça marche.
siege card that can be distracted by one skeleton running across.
Dude, yeah, I'm not even gonna lie. Someone could go a 6 elixir mortar, and you could take away like 40% of its health with one perfectly placed fire spirit.
Across the map? No chance. Everyone would just play Expo instead. Expo can't be distracted the same way, it shoots faster, it connects quicker, and Mortar would be left behind in the dust. Even its evolution couldn't save it. Sure, evolved Mortar shoots faster and spawns goblins, cute idea, but when you're up against champions, mini tanks, and cycle decks moving at light speed, that 6 elixir cost would make it a dead card before it even touched the ground. If elixir costs never changed, Mortar would have stayed a clunky, outdated
Ah mais 400 de dégâts,
deck,
ça fait
immediately
plaisir.
regret playing. And yet
Le
there
double
was
des
one
dégâts.
building that didn't get deleted, even though it probably should have. Number 10, Bomb Tower. There's a reason
Là, c'est
the
4.
Bomb Tower is remembered as the worst card.
Bro, I disagree. A bomb tower was like my favorite tower when I was a jit. That was my first like tower I ever used.
In Clash Royale history. Back in
Ouais, mais à
2016,
5.
it
Oh.
cost 5 elixir.
5,
And
t'as la
for
Tesla et
those
tout.
5 elixir, you got nothing. No death bomb, no damage,
Dude, look how
no
high he's throwing it.
presence. It had a 60-second lifetime, sure, but that barely mattered. Its projectile speed was just 300.
high
That
he
is so
threw it.
low, it literally missed Hog Riders on their first pass.
Oh yeah,
It had
I
a
remember this, bro.
range
Ah
of
ouais, c'est chaud.
6.5 times.
Hello, Chanmi.
An attack speed of 1.8 seconds and
Wow.
no real threat.
Non,
It
c'est
couldn't stop
horrible.
Fast troops, couldn't pressure, and couldn't defend well enough to
C'est
justify
nul,
the cost.
comment
And
c'est
yet
nul.
Supercell somehow made it worse. In May of 2016, despite that 0% usage rate, they've reduced its lifetime to 40 seconds and its range down to 6 tiles. A straight-up nerf to a card
Nobody.
was using. There was a brief moment, March of 2016, when spawners like Tombstone and Barbarian Hut were buffed and Bomb Tower's usage rate spiked to 12%, but it died just as fast. New splash units like Princess and Ice
Mais en fait, il y a
Wizard
trop de
completely
trucs
erased
bien pour
spawners from the meta, and
utiliser
with
ça, en
them,
fait.
Bomb Tower too. If
beaucoup
elixir
trop d'autres
costs were
choses.
never changed, Bomb Tower would have stayed dead. No 4 elixir version, no death bomb, just 5 wasted elixir and 60 seconds of pretending to matter. It wasn't just bad, it was a glitch in the game that never got fixed, until players begged for it. Number 11, Giant Skeleton.
Même à 4, c'est pas ouf.
Imagine a world where Giant Skeletons still cost 7 elixir. Could it work in today's Clash Royale?
What?
Maybe,
sept.
but barely. Back in early 2016, Giant
7, ça
Skeleton was one of
pourrait
the most
passer, hein.
confusing cards in the game. He wasn't a win condition, didn't deal much damage, and he was super easy to distract. But if you let him get close, that death bomb could wipe out your entire push, and take a third of your tower with it. Literally, his bomb dealt over 950 damage to towers at launch. In theory, he was a defensive monster and
Look at the old golem chat. Oh my gosh.
Oh
offensive
my
threat
god.
rolled into one. In practice, he was just too awkward to use, and that was because he cost 7 elixir. That cost made him almost impossible to fit into any cycle-based strategy. By the time you could afford him, your opponent had already dropped a counter. He was clunky, inconsistent, and downright slow, especially in a meta filled with cheaper,
Je sais
faster
pas, je sais pas.
cards. And
7,
once
c'est
Supercell
possible.
increased his death bomb delay from 1 second to 3 seconds, you could often just walk away from it. After months of low usage, he was quietly dropped to 6 elixir, making him a little more forgiving to play. And with
Ouais,
enough
c'est
buffs, he
vrai,
eventually
c'est vrai.
found his place in the game. But let's
Vu
be
que tu peux le
honest,
distraire.
Bro, Giant
Si, c'est bien.
Skeleton is always in like the cool.
Oh.
Coolest decks, bro. Like Giant Skeleton is in that one Skelly Barrel clone deck, and it's like he's always in the coolest decks.
if he still cost 7, he'd be
là.
unplayable today. Not because the card is bad, but because Clash Royale has changed. There are too many cheap cards, too many distraction troops. and too many fast decks.
C'est vrai que pour 7 ça fait mal. Genre l'autre 7 c'est quoi? C'est électro-géant et tu peux pas le distraire, c'est ça qui est bien.
And that's probably why he survived. Even at 7 Elixir, Giant Skeleton had something most cards didn't. Personality. And today, at 6 Elixir, he can still work. He's not broken,
bro,
he's not
I kind of think he's good though, bro. I don't think he's
dominant, but in the right deck with
Non,
the
c'est
right
bien, moi je
support,
trouve. Il
he
est
is
fort,
a
le
bomb
squelette.
waiting to happen. Still, Giant Skeleton got off easy. Some 7 Elixir cards never escaped the shadows. Number 12, P.E.K.K.A.
P.E.K.K.A, c'est quoi, 8?
Back in early 2016,
crois qu'il est à 8.
P.E.K.K.A cost 8 Elixir.
What?
8 ça fait mal, hein.
How do I like not remember any of this?
And while her damage was terrifying, her cost made her nearly unplayable. She was slow, expensive, and took 3 full seconds to deploy,
et tu peux le distraire.
Useless against quick threats like Hog Rider. And if you ever tried to use her offensively, good luck. Skeleton Army, Barbarians, Inferno Tower all could shut her down for a massive elixir loss. She was meant to be a tank killer, a defensive wall to stop giants and golems, but with so many cheap swarms and punish cards in the meta, P.E.K.K.A rarely made it out alive. Even though she had the highest health in the game, her high cost and clunky playstyle kept her far from the meta.
Après, il fait mal, hein.
Eventually, Supercell dropped her to 7 Elixir, and that one change changed everything. Suddenly, P.E.K.K.A was viable. She didn't dominate overnight, but over time, she found her place. From P.E.K.K.A Double Prince to
nah, I'm gonna be honest, bro. P.E.K.K.A Double Prince was like in my opinion, the first ever like game-breaking deck. People would go P.E.K.K.A
Avec double prince,
and it was actually insane.
A bridge spam and even balloon and minor control decks. She became
Maintenant,
one
ouais,
of the
c'est
most
plus avec le bridge
iconic
spam,
cards in
le
Clash
P.E.K.K.A.
Royale history. But if she stayed at 8, she'd probably be extinct by now. P.E.K.K.A is already on the back foot in today's game, and the recent range nerf only made...
I do not know about that, bro. P.E.K.K.A's on the back foot? Bro,
Non,
like
P.E.K.K.A c'est bien.
one of probably like in the top like 30, 40 most played troops.
things worse, forcing her to
Il y a pas longtemps, il y a eu le P.E.K.K.A géant gobelin.
if she still cost 8. No way. No deck could support her. She'd be too slow, too easy to counter, and way too risky to play. Number 13, Elixir Collector.
Elixir
In
Pump.
today's Clash Royale, a 5 Elixir Collector would be absolutely game-breaking. As a side note, talking about the Elixir Collector's elixir cost is always a bit confusing. Anyway, not because it deals damage, not because it defends, but because it breaks the rules of the game itself. Every player generates elixir at the same rate. One drops every 2.8 seconds. That's the core balance of Clash Royale. But the Collector, it cheats that system. It gives you extra elixir, letting you outcycle, outpush, and outscale your opponent just for existing. And back when it only cost 5 elixir, it didn't matter what deck you were using. Golem, 3 Musketeers, Giant, even Cycle. If you got a pump down and your opponent couldn't punish it, the game was already over. You are now playing Clash Royale with a higher income than your opponent. You were literally printing elixir. You couldn't ignore it. Leave it alone, you lose.
Pump placement.
Try to kill it, good luck. It had more health than a Valkyrie, survived Rocket, and if you placed it in the middle, it could even
Ça
tank
survit
troops
la
like a
roquette.
building. Even
Did he just say it survived a rocket? The prime elixir pump was 5 elixir and survived a
Rocket, and if you placed it in the middle, it could even tank troops like a
Aye.
building. Even spells weren't enough. You'd
Did he just fireball skeleton? What is that?
still come out behind even after using a 6 elixir rocket, and if you didn't have a minor or lightning, tough luck. It was such an advantage that having it in your starting hand could decide the game before it even began. You'd
chaud.
be down 5 elixir for 2 seconds, and still come out ahead 30 seconds later. So if Supercell ever brought back the 5 elixir pump today, with modern champions, evolutions, and faster paced metas, it wouldn't
c'est
just
broken,
be
c'est
strong,
gros
it
broken.
would warp the game around it. You better believe top players would abuse it instantly. Number 14, 3 Musketeers. If you think a 5 elixir pump would break the game today, then 10 elixir 3 Musketeers would do the exact opposite. They wouldn't be
Oh
strong,
là,
they
c'est
would be
Oh my god.
unusable.
10 c'est horrible.
Even with them being 9 elixir, you still barely ever see them.
Royale 10 Elixir is the hard cap. No refunds, no discounts, so when you play a 10 Elixir card, you're committing everything. And praying your opponent doesn't have a 4 Elixir Fireball in hand. Back in 2016, that was fine. People didn't know how to punish, Elixir Collector was everywhere, and spells weren't as common. But now, your deck has a cheap punish. Every deck has a big spell, and if you drop 10 Elixir at once, you're not just taking a risk, you are asking to lose a
C'est
tower.
chaud.
Even
C'est vrai que maintenant avec
if you
boule
split
de
the
feu,
Musketeers,
roquette,
you're still
poison,
making Elixir. Literally, because
y a
of the
trop de
10
choses.
cap, playing them instantly
Même,
loses you 0.3 Elixir.
Foudre.
And you delay just
La
a second
foudre.
longer, now you've lost 0.6, and that
C'est
means
chaud,
your 10
c'est chaud,
Elixir
c'est chaud.
card costs almost 11. It was a nightmare to balance, so eventually Supercell gave in. They dropped the cost to 9 and introduced a delayed deploy time, staggering the Musketeers one by one. It wasn't perfect, but it was a necessary fix, because at 10, this card was a trap. If you thought 10 Elixir was bad, wait until you see the card that made everyone hate Clash Royale for an entire year. Number 15, Barbarian Hunt. The card that refused to die until it did. Look, I know what you're thinking, Barbarian Hut? Really? Yeah, really. Out of every evolution,
Hello, Dobby.
champion,
Hello,
or
hello,
forgotten
hello.
win condition I could have talked about,
Nope.
this is the one
I
I'm
don't
gonna
play
spend
LOL.
most time on. Why?
I don't have an account.
Barbarian Hut is one
in
of the
Korea,
most
so
unloved, unmentioned, and
I'm in
downright
Korea, so
ignored
I don't
cards
play,
in Clash
I can't.
Royale. But not today.
I don't have
Today,
an
I'm gonna give it a
account.
spotlight that it never got, because even if it's one of the worst cards in the game right now, its history is wild.
Bro,
and honestly,
I honestly forgot this card existed, bro. Like, bro, I can't remember the last time I've seen this in ladder.
C'est chaud.
I don't even know if I've seen it, bro.
think it deserves to be remembered. So back in 2016, Barbarian Hut was the most expensive building in Clash Royale. A massive 7 elixir investment just for a slow trickle of barbarians. No damage on spawn, no clear purpose, just a hut. And yet somehow,
I don't have an
this
account,
card
Dobby, so
became
I
one
can't
of the
play.
most controversial buildings in the game. It wasn't flashy, but
Yeah,
it
it's
worked
fun.
the game around it. Entire metas, some of the most hated metas ever, revolved around stacking spawners and letting the floodgates open. Barb Hut was the face of this spawner era, and Supercell has been trying
only
to kill it
in Europe,
ever
so
since. From the beginning, the card never really fit. It was part of
it's
Clash
sad,
Royale's
but
original 32 card lineup, and like many OGs,
it's sad,
it came from a
but
time
I
before
can't.
anyone really understood what kind of game Clash Royale was supposed to be.
So,
Spawner buildings like Tombstone and Goblin Hut were already
today
simple,
we
but
were
Barb Hut
watching
was
video and just
slow
chilling and chatting.
heavy. You
But
dropped
normally
it,
we
and for
play
the next
like
60 seconds, the
Clash
opponent had
or
to spend
Pokemon
twice as much
most of the
effort
time.
defending wave after wave of barbarians.
Most of the time, yeah.
Unless they just fireball the thing instantly.
And bro, I swear, bro, like you could never, when this card was primed out, you could never get a positive elixir trade.
That's the thing with Barb Hut. It didn't need support. It didn't need strategy. It just existed. And in doing so, it stalled games, slowed pacing, and made life miserable for opponents. It was an anti-fun card. Not broken, not meta, just annoying. But while cards like Witch and Wizard were getting tweaks, the Hut was ignored for years. Literally, from 2017
like, look, that's real footage, bro. Look at how much damage a hog is doing to it. It's not even moving in health.
While cards like Witch and Wizard were getting tweaks, the Hut was ignored.
Look, it just did that.
For
안녕입니다. 오늘은 서브컬처 신작이 나왔다고 해서 한번 알아볼 텐데요. 이미 북미에서는
years.
It's not even like move. The health wouldn't even move.
Literally, from 2017 to mid 2018.
Bro, I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure if you fireball that thing in its prime, you're only taking like 30% of its health.
It saw no changes. Not because it was balanced, but because Supercell didn't want it to exist at a competitive level. But then it did. In late 2018, after years of silence, Barb Hut broke through. A fireball bait deck using cannon cart and flying machine suddenly shot up in popularity. It was weird, slow, and defensive, and at the heart of it was the Barb Hut. Suddenly the card had a purpose. It was a wall, a damage sponge, a tempo machine. From there it evolved. Royal Giant decks, Graveyard decks, even 3 Musketeers. The Hut was creeping into multiple archetypes, not because it was strong, but because it was reliable. And that terrified Supercell. Why? Because whenever Barb Hut became viable, the game got worse. Games dragged on, matches became about stalling and stacking instead of skill. And so in 2019, it got hit hard. 7% health nerf, then another 13% through Barbarians, and unlike in 2016, the Hut didn't get compensation. It was left to rot. But just when we thought it was dead, it came back. In 2020, Supercell reworked it, reduced its lifetime, sped up the spawn rate, and added Barbarians on death. A nice touch. It wasn't overpowered, but it felt fresh. And then it started winning. Graveyard decks, Royal Giant, Elixir Golem, suddenly Barb Hut had the second highest win rate in the game. And once again, Supercell panicked. Another 20% HP nerf, a full-on body slam into Irrelevance.
Le deuxième plus haut win rate, c'est chaud, c'est chaud.
Bomb Tower was nerfed, and somehow, Barbarian Hut found a place in the meta once again.
Man.
Yeah, Dobby, I have account in Europe, but I'm in Korea right now, so I can't play.
A full rework in 2022 reduced elixir cost from 7 to 6, but also a shorter lifetime and fewer spawns. A soft rework disguised as a mercy killing. And it worked. Today, Barbarian Hut is statistically the least used card in the game across every single game mode. Ladder, challenges, 2v2, nobody touches it.
Wow.
And maybe that's the point. Clash Royale is faster, flashier, and whether we like it or not, Supercell seems to have decided that the Barbarian Hut just doesn't belong anymore. Still, part of me thinks that there is a future for this card, a way to bring it back without dragging the entire game down with it. But until that happens, the once tanky titan of slow attrition remains where it's been most of its life. Gathering dust. Number 16, Barbarian Barrel.
Bro, this is not, it doesn't even seem creative though, bro. Like, oh, you just put down a Barbarian Hut and then don't do anything. It's like, it's so bad for the game, I think.
Today, Barbarian Barrel is a solid 2 elixir utility spell. But when it first rolled into the game in 2018, it cost 3 elixir.
What?
And if that cost had never been touched, it'd be collecting dust right next to the Barbarian Hut. See,
What? Ça va aussi loin?
tried to be an alternative to the log. It rolled forward, crushed troops, and spawned a bonus Barbarian at the end. But at 3 elixir, it just couldn't compete. It was slower, couldn't knock back princes, and didn't even kill archers unless over-leveled. That bonus
It kind of looks like it rolled further back then, though.
Barbarian
Ouais,
often got deleted in
il fait deux fois
was
plus, j'ai
more of a
l'impression,
joke than a
de distance.
replacement. The idea was sound, give players a different flavor of a small spell, but nobody wanted to play log plus 1 elixir for a worse outcome. So Supercell made a bold move. They dropped it to 2 elixir, and just like that, it became viable. Suddenly it offered value, a cheap counter to Goblin Barrel Archers, Dark Goblin, plus a tanky Barbarian to soak hits or pressure. At 2 elixir, it earned its spot in decks, and even challenged the log's throne in certain metas.
Ah mais ça va jusqu'au milieu.
It actually rolled so much further.
Maybe you see it once every 300 games, and probably only in a meme deck with Battle Ram, Barb Hut, and Rage Quits. Number 17, Bowler. Bowler is one of the best anti-mid ladder cards in the game today, but that wasn't always the case.
Bro, he was 6 elixir.
6, oh 6, ça fait
Was
mal.
first added back in
Genre il est pas assez fort pour coûter
6 elixir. Yeah, 6. And if that cost had never changed, we probably wouldn't be talking about him right now, because no matter how many boulders he threw, nobody was paying Mega Knight prices for knockback and a slow walk. Thankfully, Supercell realized that mistake fast. Just 2 months after his release, Bowler was reworked.
Dude, the only problem with the boulder, like he's my favorite card, my most used card ever, but the only issue with him is like, he has no offensive capability whatsoever. Like,
Ouais, c'est vrai que c'est défense. Attends, je vais voir.
Down to 5 elixir.
Boum, boum, boum. Gotta get. Je vais voir un truc. Je pense pas que je l'ai. Non, c'est beaucoup plus haut, je crois, le Bowler. Si on aurait fait un petit deck Bowler là. Un petit deck sympa. On va prendre aussi nos récompenses. On va pas jouer, on va pas jouer. Là, on chill juste, on discute. On se met bien, les kids. Just chilling today. Today we chilling. Allô? Chat? Ok, c'est le jeu. Je vais rester mon PC. On relance. Ok, je fais plus rien faire. Oh, wow. Du coup, je pense pas qu'on a le bowler. Hein. Non. 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 C'est quand le bowler? Celle-là. 4002. Ok. Ah, c'est long. Dommage, sinon on va faire un deck bowler. Attends, regarde. On peut faire un deck truc barbare là. Mais je sais pas si c'est... J'aime bien le mortier en fait. Moi j'ai envie de jouer mortier mais... C'est pas ouf. Bah après si je dis le mortier il est pas ouf mais si je joue ça c'est encore pire. C'est encore pire. Ok. Ok, on continue.
Instantly turning him into one of the most valuable defensive units in the game. For just 5 elixir, you could shut down bridge spam, elite bar pushes, and even entire beatdown pushes if paired with a tank killer like Mini P.E.K.K.A. or Inferno. But let's imagine he never got that cost drop. He'd be way too expensive for how slow and situational he is. His long roll is great, but he can't hit air. He struggles against spread out pushes, and if your opponent doesn't line up just right, you just wasted 6 elixir on a purple rock thrower. Boulder only works today because he walks the line between tanky and supportive. At 5 elixir, he is slow but fair. At 6, he'd be clunky, overcosted, and maybe even extinct. So yeah, if elixir costs never changed, Bowler would be back in Frozen Peak where nobody uses him, right next to Barbarian. But he's not the only card that was misunderstood at launch.
Alors. Ouh.
Number 18, Fisherman. One of the strangest cards in Clash Royale and probably one of the hardest to balance. His hook can ruin entire pushes or do absolutely nothing. But when it was released in 2019, Fisherman cost 4
ça fait un peu cher.
People hated him. He had decent stats, a slightly faster hook speed than today, and technically filled a unique role. But he felt clunky, inconsistent, and painfully underwhelming. His biggest issue was reliability. Miss your hook by a half tile, and you were down 4 elixir for nothing. Supercell even tried to make his hook work on air troops, but the animation broke, so they scrapped it entirely. And that's when they did something drastic. They dropped his cost to 3 elixir. Suddenly, this joke of a card became more terrifying. Fisherman wasn't just some weird gimmick anymore. He was a hard counter to Hog Rider, Mega Knight.
I'm talking about this. I'm sorry, but if I did that, the bandit would have just dashed into my face.
Fisherman wasn't just...
Bro, if I did this, it would not work.
Some weird gimmick.
The bandit would have just dashed into my face and did 100,000 damage.
Anymore. He was a hard counter to Hog Rider, Mega Knight, Ram Rider, Battle Ram, Royal Giant, and Golem. You could literally pull entire win conditions into the opposite lane or straight into the King Tower. That level of control for 3 Elixir was absurd. So they nerfed him. They cut his hook distance, then reverted that. Essentially, they just slowed down the hook itself, which was the version we have today. Still, even now, Fisherman is one of the most unique and polarizing cards in the game. Some players swear by him, saying he's one of the highest skill ceilings in Clash Royale. Others think he's inconsistent, distractible, and matchup dependent. But here's the thing. If his elixir cost never dropped to 3, he never would have reached this high skill, high reward status in the first place. He would still be sitting in Royal Giant decks as an awkward tech card that nobody wanted to use. The 3 elixir cost is what unlocked his potential.
Nice.
So yeah, in a world where elixir costs never changed, Fisherman would have stayed a weird gimmick with a fishing rod. And the only thing he'd be reeling in is dust. Number 19.
Le Monk. Ah, il était à... Non, ouais, il était à 6, non?
4 elixir.
4.
Riley told me about this.
Ah.
I didn't even play back then.
À 4.
That would be a disaster. When he launched in late 2022, Monk already felt broken, and that was before players figured out just how unfair he truly was. He could reflect fireballs, rockets, arrows, goblin barrels, even sparky blasts. He wasn't just tanky, he was unkillable in the right hands. And all of this for just 4 elixir.
C'est vrai que
Imagine a
4,
Clash Royale
même
where
5,
the
c'est
cost
pas
was
mal.
never changed. Monk would still be sitting at the top of the meta, warping every match around him. His value was simply absurd. For the price
C'est vrai
of
que
a
maintenant
mini
5
deck,
ça
you got a
passe.
champion that shut down win conditions, punished spell usage, and hard countered half of the cards in the game, all while walking toward your tower with a smug, bald smile. Every deck would be a Monk deck. Every match would start with a Monk in the back, and every mid-ladder push would end with your own fireball getting launched right back at your King Tower. That is legitimately how bad it would be. When Supercell finally nerfed Monk's elixir to 5, his usage dropped instantly. But here's the crazy part. Nothing else about the card changed. He was still the same stat-wise, the same abilities, same animations, just 1 more elixir. And suddenly nobody wanted to use him. That shows how much impact cost has in Clash Royale. 1 elixir turned Monk from a meta-defining menace into a forgotten relic. In our alternate timeline where elixir costs never change, Monk would still be everywhere. Archer Queen, dead. Skeleton King, outclassed.
Bro, I don't think he's a relic, bro. This dude's a beast.
Il est fort, hein? Moi aussi, je trouve qu'il est fort.
History. No joke. So yeah, if elixir cost never changed, Monk would have stayed for elixir and Clash Royale would have become Monk Royale. Number 20, Heal Spell.
This is the one I was waiting for, bro.
Ça, ouais, ça il existe même plus.
What if the Heal Spell never changed its elixir cost? Well, then Clash Royale might have never deleted a card. The original Heal Spell cost 3...
Yeah, I think the Heal Spell is the only card they've ever deleted.
Elixir, and it was a problem from day 1. It gave 3 Musketeers the power to survive fireballs, poison. It wasn't just annoying, it was game-breaking. And for a while, it worked. Battle Ram plus heal plus 3 Musketeers.
Dude, I remember this deck right here, bro. This was the only deck it worked in, but my god, was this deck broken. Some people would run Minion Horde as well, but
Ah ouais.
you had to
Après c'est vieux, hein. C'est vieille carte, vieux deck. Mais genre tu le joues maintenant, c'est nul à chier. Je pense.
Like this deck was so broken, and then they would go like, if you fireball the 3 Musketeers, they would just go like Battle Ram Minion Horde at the right bridge. Like, dude, this deck, like 3M Fireball Bait, one of the most broken fucking decks ever.
Worked. Battle Ram plus heal plus 3 Musketeers became the single most frustrating deck in the meta. Drop a fireball, they heal it off. Try poison early, they wait, then heal mid-tick and keep pushing. This 3 elixir spell turned one of the most oppressive archetypes in the game into a nightmare. It didn't matter if your deck had counters. Heal rewrote the rules of the interaction. But the worst part,
non, par contre, ça hit
outside of
beaucoup.
that synergy,
Ça hit
heal
beaucoup,
was
beaucoup.
trash. That's what made it so hard to balance. Supercell couldn't buff the card because it would break 3
I'll be honest, like, I don't even remember Heal Spell in any other deck besides this.
Musketeers, and they couldn't nerf the Musketeers because that would hurt a core card people loved. So what did they do? They deleted it. And honestly, that was the right move. If elixir costs were never allowed to change, heal spell would still be stuck at 3, unusable in most decks, overpowered in just 1. Clash Royale would be terrified to rework it since even the slightest buff tipped the scales. Instead, Supercell made the boldest move in card history. They turned it into a 1 elixir spirit. Same name, same effect, totally different design. It went from the worst spell in the game to the most used card in 2020. That one change from 3 elixir to 1 gave it cycle potential, synergy with Royal Hogs, and just enough risk reward to be viable without breaking anything. But if elixir costs were locked forever, then heal spell would still be 3 elixir. It wouldn't be in Royal Hog decks, it wouldn't be in competitive play, and it wouldn't be in the game at all because Supercell removed it in 2020 for a reason. Number 21, Electro Giant. What if Electro Giant still cost 8 elixir today? He would be dead. Let's be real. E-Giant's whole identity
Déjà là, la
is
7 c'est pas ouf. Alors à 8.
The map, soaking damage and zapping back anything that dares to touch him. But at 8 elixir, that trade is just too expensive. When Electro Giant was first introduced in late 2020, he was designed to be anti-swarm. He punished cheap spam cards and forced players to rely on tank killers instead, like Mini P.E.K.K.A, P.E.K.K.A, or Inferno. That was the idea, but in reality...
Hot take, I think the E-Giant is just trash, bro. Like, I do not even...
C'est nul, hein. Moi aussi, je pense que c'est nul.
7 elixir win condition and like a cannon basically full counters him.
In reality, he was a walking matchup check. If your opponent didn't have a proper building or big damage unit in cycle,
mais par contre quand il est sorti,
won the game.
C'était chiant à jouer contre.
You lost it. Simple as that. His reflected damage scaled. His stats were high, and with Tornado and Lightning, the support package made him
really only good against like swarm decks, bro.
Frustrating to deal with. Players hated him, not because he was too strong all the time, but because he felt unfair. Still, he saw play because he could work in the right meta, but that meta didn't last. By 2022, the hate caught up. Supercell dropped the cost from 8 to 7 elixir, but it came at a price. 15% less health and damage, a massive nerf that killed his auto win potential, but made him playable. More fair, more fun to watch, and more skill-based as well. But if he never got that elixir cost reduction, Electro Giant would still be a joke today. At 8 elixir, he'd be too slow for modern metas, too risky in double elixir, too punishable by evolving threats. And also way too expensive for ladder, where every interaction matters.
8, il y a que le golem qui se passe.
Tank and a walking tower shredder. Without that change, E-Giant wouldn't still be hated, he'd be forgotten. Number 22, Goblin Hut.
5 elixir, right?
4 years. The 5 elixir Goblin Hut was the definition of annoying. Not strong, not dangerous, just annoying. It would sit there, slowly spawning spear goblins.
Bro, I'm not even kidding. When Clash Royale first started, bro, people would literally just go like Goblin Hut, then Tombstone, and like that was their offense.
Every few seconds, chipping away at towers and wasting your time. It was passive, frustrating, and nearly impossible to balance. But in 2025, that finally changed. Supercell gave Goblin Hut a full rework, and this time they nailed it. The passive spawn timer, gone. Now the hut only spawns goblins when enemies enter its radius, turning it into a reactive strategic defense rather than a slow burn chip machine.
C'est vrai que c'est beaucoup mieux maintenant.
In theory, if it stays alive for its full 30 seconds and keeps getting triggered, it can actually spawn more goblins than the original version. But it feels completely different. This new Goblin Hut doesn't reward you for mindlessly dropping it in the middle and walking away. It asks, are you playing it where it'll actually get value? Will it support your defense? Is the enemy about to push into it? Suddenly, it's not just a press and wait card, it's a calculated setup piece. Yeah. And for once, it is viable. Within weeks of the rework, it cracked into multiple top 200 decks, most notably a powerful Electro Giant build that ran Bowler, Tornado, and Baby Dragon. It gave players low commitment defense with upside. Cheap goblin swarms that slowed down pushes, defended backlines, and even chipped towers if left ignored, all for just 4 elixir. The biggest surprise? It wasn't broken. It was balanced. The rework fixed its biggest flaw, that passive damage tags players hated, and replaced it with interaction. It had counterplay, intention. You could finally outplay a Goblin Hut or misplay it. That alone makes it one of the cleanest reworks in Clash Royale's history. No more infinite spear goblins, no more spam.
Maintenant, il y en a plus trop qui le jouent, mais
for the first time in 9
ça se joue,
years,
quoi.
Goblin Hut is fun. And that is something no one expected. And finally, number 23.
Le combat à l'état 3.
If Clash Royale never changed elixir costs, Bomber might have stayed in the trash bin forever. Originally 3 elixir, Bomber was one of the cheapest splash units in the game, but it never really found its place. Too fragile,
Maintenant, il est fort, hein, en vrai.
attack, and overshadowed by literally every other splasher in
C'est
the
un
game.
bon
Blizzard did
truc
more damage, Valkyrie tanks better, Ice Wizard slowed,
beaucoup de troupes.
Bomber just existed. And in Top Ladder, it didn't even do that.
C'est fort de ouf. Bah, vu que ça coûte que 2 en plus, tu perds pas trop et tout, franchement, sympa. How I made a terrible Pokémon win. Ah mais c'est du 1 contre 1, monsieur. Moi je comprends pas le... ça. Regarde ça. Pokémon have no right being bad.
Not every Pokemon needs to be good. The early route bug or the common fish or the comic relief Pokemon of a given generation are totally fine being bad. If every Pokemon is good, then none of them are. Like it or not, Pokemon was never intended to be a competitive game, but it is clear that in recent generations, Game Freak has been designing more and more Pokemon with competitive in mind, at least somewhat. Now, a lot of these Pokemon are appropriately great in the competitive scene, but some have no right being as bad as they are. These are Pokemon whose designs were clearly made with some semblance of strength in mind, but just came up short due to their stats, typing, move pool, or ability. So, let's take a look at these Pokemon and how I would fix them to be good while still keeping relatively on theme.
Okay.
First, we have Golisopod. Golisopod is a bug water type that was introduced in Generation 7 with a base stat total of 530. Very solid.
Ah, il est
What
pas mal.
I'll never understand though is why it was given a drawback ability. Emergency Exit forcibly switches the user out of battle when its HP falls below half. This was likely made so that it has synergy with First Impression, the strongest priority move in the game that can only be used the first time a Pokemon is sent in battle, which was Golisopod's signature move at the time of release, but is now more widespread. Other times that this ability could be good are when you're trapped by Shadow Tag and you want to escape, and that's about it. This Pokemon's stats are not legendary level, they're fully evolved starter level, so it has no right being dragged down this much. Toadscroll is a similar case, but I would argue that it does have a right being bad, since Fast Spore would be broken without a drawback ability, but nothing that Golisopod has would be broken if it just had a regular ability. Moxie Boosted recently made a similar video, and he suggested Shell Armor, which I think would work perfectly. Another possibility would be Shed Skin, a reference to the fact that Golisopod is an isopod, organisms that molt their shells. Either way, pretty much anything would be better than Emergency Exit.
Oui, juste lui met une autre habilité.
Guaranteed crit moves with Shell Armor, or being able to potentially shrug off common statuses like Sleep from Amoonguss' Spore with Shed Skin would give Golisopod a great use. Its low speed isn't much of an issue since it has good bulk and priority with First Impression, Sucker Punch, and Aqua Jet, and since it no longer has Emergency Exit to switch itself out, give it U-Turn instead. Scale Shot could make sense as well, just to give it even more options. Next, we have Regigigas. As the leader and creator of the Legendary Giants, the Legendary group consisting of Regirock, Regice, Registeel, Regieleki, and Regidrago, why is Regigigas the weakest out of all of them? It's a legendary Pokemon. Why was it given Slow Start, one of the worst abilities in the game? Slow Start has the user's attack and speed for 5 turns, and the counter resets if you switch. Game Freak was also absolutely trolling when they made Regigigas' signature move. Crush Grip is a normal type attacking move that varies in base power, with it being stronger the more HP the target has. So, either Regigigas uses this move when the target has high HP, but it's weakened since it hasn't gotten its act together yet from slow start, or it's after it gets its act together, but the target has low HP since multiple turns have already passed. The easy fix to this is to literally just give Regigigas a normal ability. Pressure or clear body would be totally fine, with most early legendaries having pressure and the original 3 Regis having clear body, but I want to also try and rework slow start. First, make it so that the counter cannot reset upon switching. The fact that it can reset is so debilitating even now that Regigigas has Protect to stall out the turns. Then, make it so that instead of attack and speed being halved for 5 turns, it would start being halved and then the reduction would go down by 10% every turn. So, it would have a 50% reduction on turn 1, a 40% reduction on turn 2, 30% on turn 3, and so on. It would be neutral on turn 6, and then on turn 7, its attack would start increasing by 10% every turn, and would cap at 50% after 5 turns, so on turn 11 it would be at full power. This counter would reset upon switching, it would make Regigigas go back to neutral, so no boosts, but also no attack or speed halving.
Mais du coup tu vas le jouer avec des Pokémon assez tank, essayer de faire durer la gamme le plus longtemps possible.
It would still be balanced enough to not be overwhelmingly powerful.
Ouais, c'est vrai, ça peut être pas mal. Ça peut être pas mal. Je suis d'accord, c'est sympa son truc, c'est sympa. Allez, pouce bleu.
Next, we have Overquill. Legends Arceus introduced a decent number of cross-generational evolutions and regional variants, with some of them being really good, but others not so much. If you look at the 4 cross-generational evolutions introduced in Legends Arceus that are not part of a split evolution family, you'll see that Overquill has the lowest base stat total out of all of them. I see no reason for Overquill not to have at least a 520 base stat total, and what I feel is lacking in its base stat distribution is attack and special defense, so bump up both of those by 5. You could even just keep its 510 base stat total and take 10 points from its special attack, which is the route they went with Sneasler. Its dark poison typing is very solid, and it has 2 great ability options with Intimidate and Swift Swim, so the extra attack should help it sweep with Swift Swim, and the extra special defense should help it stay alive on the special side, with Intimidate helping out on the physical side. Something else that should help is Spiky Shield, the overall best and most consistent Protect variant in the game that would make perfect sense on Overquill with all of its pointy spines.
C'est vrai,
Next,
ça
we have
maîtrise.
Surfetched. Surfetched is another cross-generational evolution that I feel has no right being as bad as it is. First, why is it not flying type? It's a bird, and sure, it might not be known for flying since it's holding a leek, sword, and shield, but it's not like being flightless in lore stopped Galarian Zapdos, Volibee, Dodrio, and Delibird from being flying type. This would give Surfetch'd stab on Brave Bird, allowing for extra coverage like hitting bug types for super effective that resist fighting. Its stats are not great, with high attack but not high enough speed to get a sweep going, and not good enough bulk to do anything else. For abilities, Steadfast is bad, but Scrappy is actually pretty good. I propose a slight tweak to its stats, a 3rd ability, and a new move to give it more of a use. It doesn't need 135 attack, so take 5 away from its attack and tack that onto its speed, and take 8 away from its special attack and redirect that to HP. Give it sharpness to boost its existing slicing moves Leaf Blade, Solar Blade, Fury Cutter, and Night Slash, and give it Sacred Sword as an additional stab slicing move since it literally uses a sword. Well, a leek that acts like a sword, but you get the idea. Now, before you say that this is absolutely broken, look at Gallade, a fighting type with sharpness and a 125 base attack stat that does get Sacred Sword.
Maintenant
which is what I am proposing. Sharpness Surfetched with Sacred Sword would be a great wall breaker, but it would not be broken. The boost to HP is great if it doesn't want to use Sharpness Sacred Sword, but instead Scrappy Final Gambit, the only Pokemon in the game with access to that combination. At base 70 with full HP investment, Surfetch'd could one-shot anything with 100 base HP and 4 HP EVs. Does Annihilape have both higher HP and higher speed to pull this off better? Yes, but it doesn't have Scrappy to hit ghost types, so Surfetch'd could have a niche over it at times. Next, we have Tapu Bulu. Tapu Bulu is one of the 4 guardian deities.
À un moment, il était beaucoup joué avec pour le terrain. Bon, maintenant,
But like Regigigas, legendary Pokemon are supposed to be strong, and Tapu Bulu has really gotten screwed over when compared to the other Tapus and some other new Pokemon that have been released. Let's cut right to the chase. It's bad because it doesn't get Fairy Stab and doesn't get Grassy Glide. Is buffing it as simple as just giving it these two things? I think kind of, yeah. It should definitely get Play Rough, but the thing about giving it Grassy Glide is that it might seem a bit off theme. The Isle of Armor DLC of Sword and Shield introduced 4 moves with unique terrain interactions, 1 for each terrain, and the Tapus very specifically were not given access to these moves, so it feels a little weird just giving Tapu Bulu the grass move. We also can't really change its stats without completely throwing off the consistency of the quartet, since they all have the same base stat total of 570 with the individual numbers of 130, 115, 95, 85, 75, and 70 just distributed differently. Personally, I'm not opposed to giving it Grassy Glide as a buff, but I just want to point out some of the inconsistency in design that they follow. Next, we have Hisuian Avalugg. Regional variants as a whole are generally better than their original forms because they're a second attempt at making something good. A lot of regional variants improve upon the weaknesses of their original form, usually by gaining a new typing, a new ability, new moves, or a more efficient base stat distribution. For example, Hisuian Samurott is Water Dark as opposed to Samurott, which is just water, has Sharpness as opposed to Shell Armor, has a signature move Ceaseless Edge, and has 5 less HP, defense, and special defense in exchange for 15 more speed. Hisuian Avalugg does do all these things, showing that there was an attempt at reworking it, but this attempt utterly failed. Hisuian Avalugg gains the Rock typing, making it Ice Rock, one of the worst dual typings in the game. It gains the ability Strong Jaw, but only learns 3 biting moves. It has a signature move Mountain Gale, but it's inaccurate, and its 30% flinch chance will hardly ever come up with Hisuian Avalugg's 38 base speed. It did gain 10 attack, but at the cost of losing 10 special defense. Overall, Hisuian Avalugg is one of the worst, if not the worst designed regional variant. First, the signature move should have been Rock type, and it should have been a biting move, just like how Hisuian Samurott's signature move is a Dark type slicing move. Let's call it Stone Cold Chomp to reflect the Ice Cold Bite of Hisuian Avalugg and make it 80 base power, 95% accurate, with a 10% chance to freeze. It also should have been given more biting moves, so give it Psychic Fangs, and while we're at it, give it Ice Shard for priority. Next, we have Wo-Chien. Like Tapu Bulu, Wo-Chien is the weak grass type out of its legendary quartet. Being Grass Dark is really tough because of the existence of that funny bug move that switches you out. Not only that, but 6 other regular weaknesses has terrible synergy with Wo-Chien's stats and ability, both of which incline it into being defensive. It easily has the worst base stat distribution, with its defenses not being good enough to make up for its awful typing. Unlike the Guardian Deities, the Treasures of Ruin do not maintain the same individual base stat numbers, so I'm allowing myself to change Wo-Chien's stats. I'd suggest taking away 5 from each of its attacking stats and moving them to HP, giving it slightly better bulk. I'd also give it Rage Powder for redirection to give it more utility as a supporting mon in doubles. Honestly, I can't really justify Rage Powder making much sense on Wo-Chien thematically. I guess it gets Poison Powder, which is a powder move, and Leech Seed and Pollen Puff, which are kind of similar moves, but this is the best I can come up with. Other than that, I was maybe thinking Parting Shot, but this is really pushing what would make sense on Wo-Chien at this point. Lastly, we have Pincurchin. This was definitely the Pokemon on this list that I felt has the biggest right to being bad, if that makes sense, because its design doesn't feel super serious, and more than it's just supposed to be a funny little guy. My main issue with Pincurchin being bad though is its status on being an electric terrain setter. After Gen 7 gave us the Tapus for automatic terrain setting, Gen 8 gave us 4 alternative non-legendary Pokemon to use as well. Rillaboom for Grassy, Galarian Weezing for Misty, the Indeedee for Psychic, and Pincurchin for Electric. Without the Tapus in Scarlet and Violet though, and Miraidon being limited in legality, Pincurchin has been our only electric terrain setter for a while. The issue with Pincurchin is that it just does so little other than setting up electric terrain. its base stat total is pretty notably lower than the other 3 new
Tu lui mets un peu plus d'HP.
So let's start by giving it 10 more special attack. It really needs more HP, and I feel like moving 20 points from its attack to its HP is very reasonable. It really should have been allowed to keep rising voltage, and it needs some sort of disrupting to go along with that as well, and I suggest Nuzzle. For more utility, give it Volt Switch to allow for better potential in being able to set electric terrain when it's been overridden.
Parce qu'il est plein de piquants, tu peux...
Ça met sens. With things like Skull, Recover, Spikes, Toxic Spikes, and Memento. And those are Pokemon that, in my opinion, have no right being bad.
Alors, Samouraï, je suis d'accord. Réguillas, t'es pas obligé de le changer pour moi. L'évolution de Quillfish. L'évolution de Quillfish, tu peux la up parce que vraiment on ne voit jamais. L'évolution de Carnatic. Est-ce que je la up? Tu peux. Mais genre juste tu up tu lui mets juste d'autres attaques, je pense. Genre tu leur rajoutes juste les attaques. Tapu, moi je trouve qu'il est assez bon. Il était quand même un peu joué. Bon, maintenant il y a un Riaboom, donc c'est beaucoup plus fort, mais de toute façon maintenant plus personne ne jouera. Les Tapu maintenant ils sont finis. Comme le Tapu fini. Avalog. Bon, tu peux lui rajouter une attaque, hein, une petite attaque truc, mais c'est juste son type en fait est nul, donc dans tous les cas, peu importe ce que tu lui fais, c'est compliqué quoi. Wuxian c'est bien dans les teams stall en fait. Donc ouais. Wuxian c'est pas mal. Tu peux peut-être lui rajouter un ou deux moves pour qu'il soit un peu plus utile et peut-être se servir de pivot, mais je trouve il est ok comme ça, c'est juste c'est moins utilisé son passif que les autres quoi. Et Watapic, pour moi t'es pas obligé de le up, genre c'est censé être un Pokémon nul.
Anyway, if you want to support me and my channel, just leave a nice comment,
mais
since I do read all comments. You can also become a member for 99 cents USD to get a badge next to your
Allez voir sa chaîne XBell. Il est sympa. Pokémon. Tout le monde en parle du insécateur qui a gagné le régional. What?
알러지가 있다고 이 귀여운 댕냥이를 어떻게 포기해? 지르텍이 지켜줄게요.
In every generation of competitive Pokemon, there will be one central presence that stands tall among everything else. The number one Pokemon of a metagame is like the sun that everything else orbits around. These number one Pokemon tend to be the easiest to throw onto a team and find success with, and they are the Pokemon that everything else is trying to beat. Every single generation of competitive singles has its own unique number.
Ah mais c'est un single, hop là, allez, vite, ciao. Vite, ciao, nous on fait demi-tour. Je veux voir son image.
Pokemon has always been a big part of my life. I've been playing it casually on and off for about 20 years, but I've never considered playing it competitively, until recently. One day, I was watching YouTube when I saw Ludwig streaming Point Crow and Peachow's Nuzlocke Invitational. I thought it was just going to be a fun event where streamers did a Nuzlocke and then battled at the very end.
Normalement, il fait quoi? Ça, c'est le nouveau Raichu Broken là. Ah ouais. Il se met à Pokémon. Avant il faisait que du Binding of Isaac. Ok, c'est un joueur de Binding of Isaac et maintenant boum, Pokémon. Il est passé de 1 an et il est maintenant Pokémon. Ok. Oh. Attends, par contre ça fait combien de temps? 18h30. Ouais, je pense on va se stop là-dessus. Je pense qu'on va se stop là-dessus, les kids. Du coup, les gars. Oh. Les gars, moi, je vais vous laisser là-dessus. Je vous dis passez une bonne journée. Bonne soirée. N'importe quoi. Bisous, ciao.